If you thought the episodes leading up to the second core were crazy, do I have news for you. This episode pulled out all the stops and became a perfect blend of mystery and thrill. I think I speak for most everyone when I say the fights had in this episode were what we've all been waiting for the last 15 weeks now. The opening animation teases some of this, but it's not one-to-one, meaning that these fights and various events seen in the opening will likely happen at some point, just not as we expect. That alone gives me those cliffhanger vibes. Additionally, I really appreciate that no one hesitated this episode. You know, like when a character sees the face of a dead friend or family member and they hesitate to land a finishing blow? That didn't happen here, and I really appreciate the animators and writers didn't pull that crap on us. It kept the story moving, and probably everyone who was watching's adrenaline as well. I want more of that. This episode really was like anime on crack. Alongside all of that, some very important things came to life this episode. Instead of calling them new, however, I think they're more like additions onto what we already knew or had assumed. Take Ushio's copying, for example. While there were new aspects to it, the overall premise and structure behind the copying hasn't changed. Unlike last week, she had a major role this episode, so any more on Ushio will have to wait for her video chapter in a minute. Okay, so real briefly here, typical reminder graphics are on screen for your viewing pleasure, and if you haven't already, hit that red subscribe button and make it turn gray. Subscriber growth has picked up a little lately, and I'm more than happy to welcome those of you who are new around here to the family. Last on the agenda are YouTube Shorts. I uploaded my first ever short Wednesday morning, and it was actually a lot of fun to edit and play around with. If you want to see more shorts, well, I think you get the idea. Alright, let us continue. An important thing that I think needs mentioning is Tokiko and some of the characterization that the anime has cut from the manga. I mentioned in the last review that, to me, Tokiko felt out of place having switched back to Shin and Ushio's side without renouncing her loyalty to Haine and Shide. Well, thanks to this wonderful commenter here on screen, we do have confirmation that Tokiko did switch sides thanks to dialogue she had with Mio and so regretting her actions. Since I'm only covering the anime of this, your comment was very helpful and much appreciated. Hope to see you around as we enter the climax of the anime now. Having Tokiko on Shin and Ushio's side now is a major +1, and without her, the success of their fight against Haine and Shide this episode probably would have been non-existent. If I wrote a piece on everything that happened in this episode, we'd be here all day, so let's move on. Ushio's role this episode was arguably one of the most important roles she's played thus far, and honestly, I'm just thankful she managed to make it back with, or to, I guess, Shin. Surprisingly, Mio also came with, but because of that, I think it's safe to say that they didn't loop back with Shin. Instead, because everything that happened up to that point was essentially data, they were able to find Shin and recall everything that had happened up to the point of his now 7th loop. As I stated earlier, there were a few new aspects of some of the things we already know. For starters, a copy of something can only exist within 50 meters of a shadow. Therefore, outside of that 50-meter range, the copy or copies are useless. What we didn't know, however, was that its effect can vary depending on what the copier wanted it to affect. That's why when Shide dragged Ushio into the fire, she was mostly unaffected. That and the fact that she copied herself, which, by the way, was actually ingenious. I don't know who comes up with this stuff, but holy shit, they're incredible. I'm pretty sure this episode solidified her alliance with Shin, though. I don't see her turning her back on Shin as part of some grand plan by Haine, but I'm still curious how she was able to sever her link with Haine like Tokiko did with the two large shadows. Regardless, the data she has turned out to be incredibly useful this episode. We knew that she had the same power to erase the shadow such as Haine does, still don't know how, but the fact that she was able to nearly erase Haine was highly unexpected. Yet I have a funny feeling there's more to the story based off of this scene alone. Let's talk about Haine and Shide for a minute now. I'm gonna get the elephant out of the room first. Who was that person, or shadow of a person, when Ushio thrust her fist through Shide? When she tried to copy Shide a few episodes ago, we learned he was empty. There was nothing off Shide to copy. So, who or what exactly is Shide? My best guess here is that he's a culmination of various other shadows with one dominant personality. But for there to be both a god and something like Shide and Hitogashima seems overly influential. The fact that the animators didn't let us see what Shide looked like after fleeing with Haine to the forest tells me we're in for a surprise when they return. Haine seems to be a bit of a different matter though. Shiori-chan's body was meant to be the one Haine would use to return with this girl and her family. We can take this one of two ways. Either Haine wants to be human and live a normal life with a family, or she means return as in, say, resurrect. It seems both will take a little time to regenerate, but my theory on the erasure is that if Ushio had erased Haine, ATTRIBUTION the god itself could have been resurrected instead or something. Basically, erasing Haine could be a very bad idea, and what's more is that she can still do more than what we thought she could, like creating a vacuum. Last but not least, we have Shin and his explanation of the looping that he seems to have gained a better grasp of. This is now his 7th loop, and like I said last week, he's going to have to be very careful what he does from this point on. I will say this though, launching an all-out assault on Haine in this loop was smart, and I'll tell you why. If the 8th loop really ends up being the final loop he can take before falling off the metaphorical cliff, then it was a wise decision to figure out what does and doesn't work against Haine and Shide. While this is something he should have done earlier, his 6th loop was cut short and he died too early in some of his early loops. There will be no 9th loop. If he loops an 8th time and dies again, there will be no 9th loop. There will be nowhere to land. This is kind of frightening, knowing that the fight against Haine has reached such a bare-bones point. The current loop he's on now is the night of the 22nd, meaning there's only one more night after this until the events of the summer festival, and we all know how that went the first time. What's amazing though is that he has been in contact with Hizuru and Ryuunosuke as well as Nezu on every loop so far, and the voice recordings that I originally thought might have been phone calls make sense. The recordings are put on the phone to explain what happened in that loop in the event Shin has to find Hizuru or Ryuunosuke again. I think they were really more of an asset in the early episodes, but now that Ushio can relay her memories and data, I can't say for sure what kind of role the recordings will play. Even so, this episode proved that Shin was not only masterful, he's quite resourceful. He now has Haine fooled into thinking the next loop will begin and she'll be ready to end his final loop. But because we know he's not going to die from a shoulder wound, what happens to Haine? Is she banking her and Shide's reformation on Shin looping again? There's a lot we've learned since episode 1 began airing back in April, yet there are still several mysteries that linger in the air. How everything comes together here at the end is going to not only be incredibly thrilling, it will probably blow a lot of people away. I didn't expect this episode to go the way it did, and there to be a huge brawl between Shin and Haine. I also didn't expect Mio's shadow to be saved, to sever its link with Haine and join Shin and Ushio's side. Summertime rendering just gets better by the week, and I'm kinda vibing with the cliffhangers as of late, no pun intended. But that's it for me. More shorts to come, and a video on Kome will be hitting your sub boxes soon as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.
I've lost myself.